Good morning, guys. Welcome back to my channel. This is Coach DC from All 22 Films. I've got an exploration here of the Lions defense, specifically their outside corner usage. Nick Whiteside, Ennis Rakestraw Jr., Roger McCreary, among others, will be what I talk about during the course of this video. A secondary focus on Isaiah, Abney, Chuck Clark, Thomas Harper, and some of the safeties slash nickel DBs that were deployed. This first play is going to be from the first possession. It's a 3 deep, 3 under from a nickel configuration on a 2nd and 5. I believe that Shepard was probably expecting run here, so called this to possibly attack against a run concept. It's a nickel blitz off the edge. I believe it's Isaiah here, and he'll be picked up really well from Chase Brown, the starting running back for the Bengals. Like I said, we're on to the first possession. So it's 3 deep, 3 under. You've got outside leverage at the bottom by Whiteside and outside leverage at the top for Rakestraw. Really weird route, actually no route release by T. Higgins here at the bottom against Whiteside. The play action briefly drew Nowaski to step up and then retreat. Burrow throws this ball just over the top of his fingertips, and a somewhat unique route up at the top from Chase. He bends it towards the outside, illustrated by that yellow line, and that creates a little bit more space on Rakestraw. It seemed to me as if Rakestraw was able to stay connected to guys, whether it was Chase, Brooks, whoever. He was able to stay connected a little bit more if he was in press, if he was able to make contact. And I don't really view him as a, to be honest with you, press man corner. As an aside, during the course of this video, if I get the player wrong between Isaiah and Abney, my apologies for that. I'm only really showing the all 22 angle, but it's kind of hard to differentiate between 27 and 28 sometimes, although Isaiah did have a white sleeve on his right arm. So still on that same first possession, it's a 2nd and 7. It's a 3-man route combination by the Bengals from 12 personnel. And Detroit and Shepard have matched with their patented kind of FU look. I call it a 6-1. Really, it's almost a 7-1 with Chuck Clark being walked up here as well. Fortunately for the Lions, the route configuration from Chase and Higgins really takes them to the same area of the field. I would say this really ends up looking like sail flood, if you ask me. So Rakestraw and Whiteside are both up here at the top. From a base defensive standpoint, we would say that's a cowboy call. And they both appear to know where their help is. I would say that this is Whiteside's kind of patented technique oftentimes against vertical releases. He appears to play a trail man-ish technique to feed the receiver into his help. In this case, I think that is Harper back there since Chuck Clark was walked up at the line of scrimmage. I'm certainly not saying that Jamar Chase doesn't have space or have him beat to a certain degree. But Whiteside's really good at this. And I've seen it 3 times during this game, basically leveraging the route. This is, of course, the sack from Hassanin, the first sack from Hassanin. One thing to mention with this concept, the way that Detroit is playing this is very similar to former Ravens defense coordinator Wink Martindale, whereby, in fact, ironically, it was Chuck Clark. If you read, if you're responsible for a tight end in that system and the tight end pass pros, then you're going to go ahead and rush the passer. And what happens here, or what could happen, I should say, is if Chase, instead of faking to the outside briefly and then bringing his route back towards the top side of our screen, if he runs onto this vacated space, since Chuck Clark is rushing the passer or attempting to, you've got some real opportunity for a big play. We've seen that hit before against the Lions last year. It didn't occur here. It's just something to mention to you. I will say this about Whiteside. He appears very calm and just unbothered by the deep routes. I simultaneously want to see more coverage snaps of him, to be honest with you, but am starting to speculate or wonder if maybe Detroit and Shepard and Dan Campbell shouldn't protect him, as at this point in time he may be the 3rd corner. Lions were obviously able to force a punt on that first possession after the sack by Hassanin. That coverage, man, heavy pressure look, that's what Detroit has majored in, right? Shepard, I think, against the Bengals, especially early in the first half, what I'm going to focus on here, did a really nice job of mixing in different looks. We're on to the second possession here. It's a 3rd and 2. And look, Burrow and the Bengals, they will convert this. All right, Higgins is up at the top. Chase is at the bottom. Detroit is trying to show man, but I mean, come on. At the bottom side of our screen in the slot, you got Devin White lined up over Jamar Chase, right? Not going to happen. They end up dropping out into a Tampa 2 with a 3-man rush. There's really only so much obfuscation you can do with Devin White lined up over Jamar Chase. But a couple of things. You did see this almost Flores-esque response from the safeties at times during the game. We didn't see 2 of them dropping out from threatening a blitz like Flores will often do in Minnesota. We saw 1. In this case, they get to a too high safety structure, and I would call this a Tampa 2, but Whiteside's getting depth here. So there's a little bit of a confusion on my part the first time that I saw this. It's very possible that this is quarter half or cover 6, but don't normally see people dropping out a defensive lineman or defensive tackle when you play cover 6 or quarter half. Oftentimes, and reality is the Bengals have struggled against Tampa 2 for years. It limits the big plays. Rakestraw, in fact, does the same thing as Whiteside here a little bit later. The reaction for me, as far as this safety's reaction, folding over the top, expanding over the top of this route, to me, makes me wonder if Whiteside isn't getting too much depth and really leaving open the possibility of Jamar Chase to get the football, running that kind of out route from a slot position against Devin White. What I'm referring to is Whiteside sitting here in the flats, and that to me is what Burrow appears to be seeing or collecting visually and understanding. Now, he does actually get the ball off to the tight end. I think the Lions came to play. They showed up to compete defensively, especially. These guys were finishing off plays, in my opinion. Burrow, Chase, and Higgins didn't necessarily want to be out there long. You can't blame them, obviously, with how important they are for that team. I like this look. I would call it a Tampa 2, but I recognize that Whiteside's reaction doesn't fit with a Tampa 2. I think there might be a mistake there. But the Tampa 2, look, in 2022, after Cincinnati made their Super Bowl, weeks 1 through 5, there was a ton of Tampa 2 usage against them by the Cowboys early in that season. Mike McDonald in a Week 5 win over the Cincinnati Bengals utilized it a ton with just different looks or different versions of it. Burrow's mobility ended up being a factor here because it was only a 3-man rush. Still on that same second possession, we've got a 1st and 10, and a similar setup here. I think this is quite obviously a quarter half or cover 6 most likely. It does have a Tampa flavor as far as the drop that Nowatzki will take, but a pre-snap here, you've got Chase and Higgins on the same side, number 1, and you've got the nickel defender spaced out to that side, but he's not moved over in a manner in which he'd be playing man on Chase. So again, you got some understanding from Burrow pre-snap about what he is and is not going to get. Similar to Whiteside on the last play, Rakestraw is going to carry number 1 up to the top of the field. That's a vertical by T. Higgins. The problem here for me is Nowatzki's drop. There's nothing wrong with it technically, but he's opening up to the wrong side. The pass strength would be over here. So if this is some type of Tampa 2 drop by Nowatzki, he should be opening up to that side. It's very possible that he notices that the tight end has pass blocks, so there's only one route to deal with there, and Devin White will collect that or relate to that route. I'm talking about this wide receiver route here. It's pretty clear that you got Whiteside sitting in the flats, and Rakestraw up at the top, getting more depth, starts to look like, obviously look like quarter half or cover 6, with Rakestraw just kind of hanging low underneath of this vertical. So there's just, in attempting to be more multiple, and I think that Shepard accomplished that with his guys, there are some small things that I either just have some questions about or don't understand to the degree that Detroit is accomplishing them. In any case, Burrow recognized it, or recognized that he wasn't going to be able to get the ball to Chase and or Higgins, and so he checked it down really quickly to P. Ryan. I think it's for an 8-yard gain. Azayan and Rakestraw are in on the tackle. We're still into that same second possession. It's a 3rd and 4 here. And Detroit and Shepard have chosen to play man free. This ends up being the quarterback hit from Eric O'Neill, the rookie UDFA from Rutgers, and James Madison before that. So there's a lot going on here, even though this is man free. So first, Chase is up to the top, Higgins at the bottom. I think that Nowaski and Devin White are banjo reading the running back. So essentially, if the running back releases to the side, and in fact that's where he goes, Devin White would take him, it turns into a wheel. As opposed to if the running back released to this side, I think Nowaski would have to traverse or navigate all this traffic from the bunch side, and then Devin White would look for work in the middle of the field. Very similar to the reaction that you get from Nowaski. I refer to it as a banjo read, different names for it. As an aside, Rakestraw is super physical with Chase up here, or they're both being physical with each other, I should say, where I have it paused right there. Chase actually has taken 2 hands and delivered a shot or a blow to Rakestraw's face mask. But check out Nowaski, and Devin White for that matter. So you can see Nowaski's helmet. He's looking at the running back release, and as soon as the running back releases to Devin White's side, he immediately turns and looks to possibly collision a crosser. T. Higgins is actually kind of avoiding contact here. Really some unusual reactions by him in this game. I thought he looked a little sluggish out of his get off or getting off the line. Number 1, and number 2 didn't look real interested in being a factor in this game. But in any case, Burrow's looking to that top side where the wheel is occurring. Rakestraw defending against Chase. Even a little bit of a bump there when the ball was not thrown his way. Burrow tries to get the ball to Chuck Clark against 87. So here is Whiteside down here at the bottom of the screen, matching up on what looks like a China in, or perhaps a whip route back to the inside by Iosivis or Yoshivas, however you say his name, number 80. Whiteside to me looks like a guy who is very confident no matter what the coverage is that's called. That's actually not 87 down here. My apologies for that. I think it's actually Gasecki. I thought it was a really positive start for Detroit's defense against Cincinnati's starters, quite obviously. Here, Flacco has come into the game on the 3rd possession. I think Devin White and Nowaski both played extremely well. Nowaski in this game gives you an idea of how unique he is as a player. An outside linebacker, inside linebacker hybrid. His reactions are sound and technical as an inside linebacker. I'm not sure what else Devin White has got to do to get a little bit of respect. I think he played really well in this one against the run and in coverage. So Flacco's first possession, and immediately he goes right at Rakestraw. I think you get a total of 3, maybe 4 targets of Rakestraw here in the first half. Detroit is in their nickel front. So 4 down linemen, 2 inside backers. That's the 4-2. And then you've got 3 of the DBs here. Middle of the field, free safety. I think that's 42. And then Rakestraw at the top. He'll be the target. Flacco's going above the rim here. Well, he's throwing the ball to his receiver above the rim. It's man free. Who knows if he had awareness of that pre-snap or knew it. But look, Flacco is a guy who will throw the ball to his athletes and let them try to make plays. That's who he's been for years. I thought live speed that this was a PD, a pass defense from Rakestraw. The replay showed, and in fact this view does as well, that really the wide receivers just dropping it before there's any contact at all. Rakestraw had difficulty covering down the field, in particular near the sideline. On deeper routes, this is not one. It's essentially just a check X fade, and Flacco throws it really quickly. Unfortunately for the Bengals, the guy's unable to hold on to the football. I don't want Lions fans or Bengals fans, if anybody's watching, to be upset here, but I want to talk briefly about Flacco's willingness to throw the football to his athletes, receivers, tight ends, versus Burrow. Burrow is more, in my opinion, procedural with his reads. Where he wants to go with the football is contingent or essentially reliant upon the coverage and the routes fitting together. Flacco's a little more willing to throw it and let his guys make plays. Why do I bring that up? Because he went at Rakestraw. From a Detroit perspective, for better or worse, that's the reality. That's the type of quarterback Flacco is, or he can be at certain times if he makes his mindset up there. And as soon as he came in the game, first pass, targeted Rakestraw. Here, In the second quarter, in fact, first play of the second quarter, we got a 3rd and 16, and they're going to get the conversion again up top against Rakestraw. They actually convert a pair of 3rd downs here on this drive early in the second quarter. Now, I should say there's a coverage bust up here at the top side. It happens when these two players overlap one another. I think it's Harper and Devin White. Essentially, Harper is playing this like cover 3 buzz, and White is playing this like Harper should drop down to the flats. Rakestraw with outside leverage and cover 3. You know, if someone is in the window between Flacco and where he's throwing this football, he may not throw it, right? Because you've got someone actually in the curl flat, number 1. Number 2, everyone is lined up deep. Look at the distance between these second-level defenders and the football. So if the safety here, like I said, I believe it's Harper, was to drop down to the curl flat, he would be in the window and able to help Rakestraw out. But there's still just so much room up there from a Rakestraw standpoint. The combination of those two things, Rakestraw on a 3rd and 16 getting incredible depth, too much, in fact, as well as what I would refer to as a coverage bust or a mix-up where you've got Devin White and Thomas Harper in the same spot on the field. We're talking about right here. The combination of those two things makes it a really easy conversion on a 3rd and 16. That was disappointing for me at that moment. I don't see those type of reps from Whiteside at all to compare those two guys, Rakestraw and Whiteside. It seems kind of silly at this point to talk about comparing them to each other. They are operating at a different frequency. Even Abney, who got beat on a 3rd down, I think in the second half over the middle, is at least connected to the receiver a little bit more. If you can't tell from watching the first half here, the all-22 and the end zone angle, I just see a clear gap between Whiteside and those other guys who might be competing for that 3rd cornerback spot. All right, that same drive in the second quarter, another target here of Rakestraw. I'm going to be a little bit more harsh in my evaluation, but in addition, talk about the way that Whiteside, and to a lesser extent Abney, kind of use their leverage. They seem to, especially Whiteside, I think, have a great understanding of where their help is. 2 safeties on the field right now, but one of them is going to drop down and insert, and in fact, they're dropping down into the boundary. It'll be the topside safety. I think it's Harper once again. And what bothers me here from a Rakestraw standpoint is it is man, and he is making contact with the receiver for a moment. You can see that Flacco is definitely looking up there. I think Flacco knew where he was going with the football the whole time. But you have help in here in the form of the safety. And you already have outside leverage. I feel like at times when I watch Rakestraw, I feel like I'm almost watching a guy who was coached by the same coach as Terrion Arnold. I'm talking about Terrion Arnold during his Detroit tenure. If I was to watch these guys and scout them from a high school standpoint, some of the small mistakes that they make that Nick Whiteside does not, I would say they're coached by the same person because they have a lack of awareness at times. I'm being, perhaps overly critical or harsh. It is a 3rd and 9. This one doesn't convert to the wide receiver. I think it's Brooks up there, but I could be wrong. They've got a number of tall receivers over there on that side for Cincinnati. What I do like down here is that both Abney and Whiteside, whose feet are kind of crossed up here for a moment, are taking outside leverage. And Whiteside does this a lot. He almost ends up in this trail man position. And I guess he feels comfortable, dealing with inside breaking routes like that. He would have help theoretically from the safety, or out breaking routes like that. The only problem is the first in breaking route is probably going to get help from that safety. I'm talking about Harper. Let me pull this back so he's outside the magnification. This is the first in breaking route that theoretically would get help from Harper. If Flacco was looking to the side, if Flacco's eyes were down here, then Harper's feet would probably be a little bit closer in towards the middle of the field. He's hedged over. He being Harper, he's hedged over a little bit because of where Flacco looked. Hopefully I said that in a way that makes sense. I think Whiteside's very aware, and he seems to have some gall or some gamesmanship to him. The injury for Rakestraw's, he had a long way to go as from a coverage standpoint, in my opinion. I see very little evidence of the awareness in Whiteside, the awareness that Whiteside has Rakestraw does not demonstrate consistently, in my opinion. If you think I'm being too harsh, feel free to let me know in the comments section. He just doesn't show up in the manner that I would have expected after watching his film at Missouri 2 or 3 years ago. I do like the Abney film from college as well. I think we need to see more of Abney in the next 2 preseason games. I'm not sure so with Whiteside, in my opinion. But in any case, this is into the second quarter. Same drive. I think Rakestraw has been hurt here by this time. I believe you've got Whiteside up at the top, and I know that you've got McCreary and Isaiah down at the bottom. Flacco, for whatever reason, hesitates here. He's got some concern about the coverage. It is cover 3, in my opinion, but McCreary is late here to getting off. And what I'm talking about is him turning and getting depth. Look at the depth that he doesn't have here, and he is threatened, versus the depth that Whiteside has. I'm not saying it's a problem or a negative thing by any means. I wonder if this is what caused Flacco to think that it wasn't going to be cover 3 and he might have access to something quickly. In addition, I like that Isaiah is making some contact. It was ever so slight. At the NFL level, these guys are like allergic to it. I recognize that they call illegal contact downfield, but at some point you got to make contact with people when you're playing a football game. McCreary down here is covering up that route. Flacco came back to the top side pretty quickly, the top side of our screen pretty quickly, and because of the cover 3 drop, this underneath dropper right here, he doesn't feel like he's got enough time against a 4-man rush. Pass ends up being incomplete. Live speed, I thought this one was kind of backwards. Thomas Harper is all over it. They used him a lot, man. Harper is rotating down here, pre-snap, into the box, and then he will work over to play curl flat in this cover 3. Curl flat is typically the top of the numbers is the curl, and you can see that's where both of those guys are located. Harper at the top side, Isaiah down at the bottom. And then they can break on any flat route, which is what happens here. Harper breaks once the ball is thrown into the flats. Again, you've got a 2nd and 3 from a Cincinnati perspective. As an aside, Chuck Clark, I think, only played 11 or 12 snaps. I do like the options they have here, but depending on how long Rakestraw is out, I know it's not serious, apparently a contusion of some sort. It makes me wonder if maybe they need to be a little protective of Whiteside here for the rest of the preseason, or whoever the Lions coaching staff perceives to be the leader of the pack as far as winning that 3rd cornerback spot behind DJ Reed and Rock Ya-Sin. Now, I should say that selfishly, I would like to see Whiteside on the field. I would want to see him in more coverage situations where and his trail man-ish technique is kind of tested. But at this point, I perceive him to be the 3rd guy behind Reed and Rock Ya-Sin. Abney, McCreary play a role as well. Isaiah is a more of a nickel safety type of hybrid. We're into the second quarter, late second quarter. In fact, Josh Johnson is in at quarterback, and we've got a 2nd and 8. It's an empty scenario from a Cincinnati standpoint, and they're playing man-free. You do have a Reed blitz down here at the bottom side of the screen. I think it's Eric Hunter. He played well, in my opinion, as a backup linebacker. Abney and Whiteside are up to the top of the screen together. Whiteside is the target. This is a very similar play to one from last year's game against Tampa Bay. If you recall, he was inserted into the game in the second half against Tampa Bay. I think the target was Egbuka. Here, Josh Johnson is attacking. I don't know if he actually makes contact with the ball. It certainly looks like he does to me. And in fact, the picture that I have up here for the thumbnail, it certainly looks like he's got hands on the ball to me. But statistically, not given any pass defense. Interesting. But in any case, really nice job of using his length. I think he's got enough speed against the caliber of receivers that they're facing now. Does he have enough speed, long speed down the field against starting caliber guys like, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, etc.? I'm not sure. But this will be the last play that I talk about here. It's again a 2nd and 8 in the second quarter. This is the pressure situation whereby Anthony Lucas beats the tight end number 87, gets a hand on Josh Johnson, and then Wingo and Gil Howard finish him off on an incompletion. I think they get to cover 3 here. What I really like is the shape shifting that occurs, number 1. Number 2, the differential timing. Now, in my graphics here that I'm showing this to you, Um, all three of these movements occur at the same time. That is not necessarily how they occur during the game, but you've got to shift from the bottom side safety into center field in a cover three. The top side safety is going to drop down and buzz, very similar to what Harper did earlier in that cover three that I said was a mix-up on the 3rd and 16 that Flacco converted, challenging Rakestraw. And then Hunter, the inside linebacker, is going to push to the flats. I know it makes it look like there's 14 guys on the field right now for the Lions. That's the whole point, is that it's pushing those guys into different spots. And from a quarterback standpoint, they've got to process it quickly. I don't want to say it's Flores-esque, right, because he does a whole lot more. But we've got a small sample size here, first half of the game that I'm focusing on, where Shepard is using a multitude of looks, in my opinion, and guys are playing it pretty well. Whiteside's got outside leverage up top. It's cover three, and you can see he's got a zone turn. It's a really weird takeoff from Josh Johnson, setting up, turning his shoulders and then setting it up. I'll call this cover three buzz because the safety is dropping down. It was actually Isaiah, and my apologies. I think I said Harper, but Johnson's looking up there to the top side. Whiteside does a really good job of covering that up. He's got really good feet, in my opinion, Whiteside. You can see his feet hit the ground multiple times here up top. Josh Johnson has pressure right in his face from Lucas. So, it ends up being an incomplete pass. These guys are really swarming after the football. I like the multitude of looks that Shepard utilized. I think that Whiteside could be a guy who's good at cover three, to be honest with you. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know what it looks like in camp or what people have reported, if he's considered to be a man corner, a zone corner. His length, his awareness, and his understanding of routes, in my opinion, projects well in cover three schemes. I know I spent most of the time talking about Whiteside. I really enjoy watching him play football. He's got a unique style, seems to be an awareness / understanding of the particular coverage concept they're using, that kind of almost trail man technique he uses. It's a real pain. It shows up in the right situation from a Whiteside perspective. He's not using it on every snap. He's using it oftentimes when he's playing press man. I think he's got great reactions to routes, and if he has help and where that help is located. I really like his game. I'm not sure if I'm overstating it. Whiteside looks smooth. Their plan, the Lions' plan, who knows what it is. I project if he's close to not getting any reps at corner at all in the next 2 weeks in the preseason games. I could be way off in my analysis there. I like Isaiah, professional, very patient, seems versatile. His collision that we saw, there was a second one that I didn't show you that occurred in the same possession. In fact, I like the way he plays football. Abney's certainly going to get a lot of reps. I would anticipate that Isaiah does as well. Perhaps McCreary. I think from an outside corner standpoint, Abney and McCreary are different than Whiteside, obviously, because they have versatility. Abney and McCreary have a background of playing nickel and or outside corner at various times. Whiteside does not. He looks like an outside corner. That's where we've seen him play. So there's different benefits to having those guys on the field. I think all three are, at this point, clearly on this roster. Unless McCreary's looked really poor in camp, which I don't have any knowledge of, those three to me, Whiteside, Abney, McCreary, make up the other corners that fill out the 3, 4, 5 spots between Reed and Rock Ya-Sin. Rakestraw's just been so inconsistent, even before the injury. Who knows how long he's out? Like I said, at least we know it's not serious, right? I do think that Shepard did a nice job with his play calls, combating the Bengals' weapons and trying to force Burrow, not allow Burrow any big plays in front of their home crowd early, which was smart, right? They got to stop on the first possession, the field goal on the second, 2 drives against their starters. Selfishly, I would have liked to have seen more of them. The Lions guys were flying around. They were very physical with the defensive line, showing multiple looks from a coverage standpoint. To a degree, I think Higgins, Chase, and Burrow just wanted to get out of there healthy, which you can understand, right? There's no reward for the risk of them being on the field on a 3rd or a 4th possession. Credit, in my opinion, due to Shepard, the defensive staff, and all those guys that we saw out on the field being ready to perform at all three levels: D-line, inside linebacker / nickel DB. Those are second level defenders. And then the corners and the safeties on the back end, all executing and competing. I'm super impressed with Whiteside. He's probably my favorite guy to watch film of here after my initial 2 film study videos. If you haven't checked them out, I did one on Ahmed Hassanin and his 2 sacks, but in addition, some of the other really noteworthy and impactful plays he had, along with a second film study video that I put out separately on Blake Miller and Detroit's offensive line. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comment section. Likes and comments drive the engagement and push the content out to larger audiences. So I would like to create as high level content as possible. If you enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comment section. If you didn't, man, tell me why. Tell me what I've got to do to get more likes on these videos and hopefully push my content out to, as big an audience as possible if you think that that is warranted. In any case, I appreciate you guys' time.